Thanks for tuning in. When Detroit went into bankruptcy, former federal judge Gerald Rosen was in the thick of things. He's got a book talking about it. Our lead story, Gary Peters will not run for the U.S. Senate, so who will? Offering their insights, Chuck Stokes, Zoe Clark, and Bill Ballenger. Sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubick.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Studio C. A big news week again in our town. So your first reaction when you heard Peters was not going to run again?
I was surprised.
Okay, I'm going to be the contrarian. I was not shocked.
Okay.
Surprise.
Did he call you personally?
No, he did not. And the sense, I mean, first, a huge hat tip to the Detroit News for breaking the news. Other folks are reporting that he only let sort of other lawmakers, politicos know within 20, 30 minutes of the Detroit News actually breaking the story. But look, you know, it is not an easy time right now to be in D.C. And when you have conversations with, sitting lawmakers and those who were sitting, it's not fun and it's hard and you're fundraising constantly.
Not only that, the Democrats have now lost the majority, and it doesn't look good for them in 2026.
Yeah, that's the political landscape.
So he's looking ahead saying, I get reelected, I'm in the minority in perpetuity at the age of 66. I'm not sure I want to do that.
Well, let's see what he had. Go ahead, Chuck.
No, go ahead.
No, please.
It's funny. I was surprised, but now when I think back on it, I ran into Senator Peters and his wife Colleen at the auto show on charity preview night. And we were talking about the fact that Stabenow was now retired. And now, when I think about some of the things he said, it starts to make sense because he was talking about, I know she's going to do well, but what a grind this job can be and everything. I mean, he wasn't saying it in a negative way. He was talking about the realities of going back and forth between Washington and your district and, crisscrossing Michigan.
So you think he'd already made up his mind not to run? It was just a question of when I timed the announcement.
He talked about something very human. They were talking about how excited they were with their new grandbaby, and that their son lived across the country.
And
so those kind of reality type of things, I think, start to sink in, especially coupled with what you said. He's in the minority now. Kamala Harris didn't win, so it's not fun being in the minority.
We talked yesterday. I got through to him in his office in Washington, and we were reminiscing when he started out in the legislature. I said, you remember those good old days when people worked together? He said, yeah. He said, I absolutely miss it. But let's see what he said. His statement was interesting by what it didn't say. Roll the tape, please. First, Michigan's U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow shocked the political world by saying she would not run for re-election. And now ditto for the state's junior U.S. Senator Gary Peters with this out-of-the-blue decision.
I will therefore not seek re-election in 2026. I'm leaving Congress, but I am not retiring.
The 66-year-old former state lawmaker, city councilperson, and former state lottery director Gary Peters says the founding fathers wanted politicians to serve for a while
and then returning to private life. I agree.
If there were personal and private reasons for this decision, he gave no hint of same in his 4-minute video announcement. He did not mention, for example, the storming of the U.S. Capitol, but he did reference the current political climate, which has burned out many.
Together, we have been able to navigate around a tough, hyper-partisan political environment.
There will now be a feverish scramble for the Republican and Democratic parties to find somebody to succeed him. Pundits will put Governor Whitmer's name in play, although she has never expressed even a hint of wanting to be a U.S. Senator. And others who are looking to run for governor, such as Pete Buttigieg, now have an unforeseen option on their table to consider. And with control of the Senate up for grabs next time, the bad news for Democrats, they'll have a tougher time holding on to the seat with an incumbent not in the race. So while others jockey for his job, the soon-to-be former senator looks forward to touring the twisting back roads of Michigan.
I can experience the joy of total freedom, riding my Harley-Davidson motorcycle on a warm, sunny day.
Yeah, riding a Harley. He says, will you come riding with me in the summer? And I said, yeah, I'm not getting on that bike with you. I said, were you burned out? He said no. He said, I still got a bunch of energy. I said, did the wife and the kids lean on you? No. I said, it was a private decision. It took some time. But he didn't waver back. And, sometimes these guys and ladies go, yeah, I'm going to lay. No, I won't. When they waddle back and forth.
Right, but part of what he's doing, right, is doing it so early in the cycle, which was important for Democrats, as we saw nationally, of course, with then President Joe Biden sort of waiting into the last minute and then being pushed out. I think there's, for many folks right now in D.C. and, statewide too, who are thinking about age when it comes to being in office, maybe not overstaying your welcome. And he's doing it now, too, to give Democrats plenty of time and candidates who are thinking about it instead of waiting, 6 months beforehand.
What is going to happen? Are the Democrats going to go to him, Mr. Ballenger, and say something?
You mean like, why don't you leave now?
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying.
No, I know that's not what you're saying. I'm just asking. I actually turned the page there, Zoe. Okay, I'm sorry.
And let the governor appoint a replacement who could run as an incumbent.
Do you think they'll go to him?
They might try. I don't think he'll do it. I mean, look, they tried the same thing with Stabenow, remember?
Right.
And it didn't work. She said, forget it. Stephen Breyer on the Supreme Court, they tried to get him out for a long time. He wouldn't go. Peters, he said one of the things that was most freeing about his decision is it gives him 2 years unfettered and not having to worry about re-election to get things done. He says, I got a lot of stuff I want to do here. He said that's one of the great things about making this announcement now and getting out with 2 years to go.
And he also made it sound as though he's going to be as involved in the process as he can be, that he's going to weigh in. At what point, I don't know, but it doesn't sound like he's just going to go away and just let the Democrats do whatever they want.
No.
That at some point he's going to use whatever leverage he can.
Well, let me clarify two things. One, I asked him, when they come to you pleading to get out of the race early so an incumbent can be appointed, okay, he said, I will not do it. It's not going to happen.
Right, exactly.
It's not going to happen.
Exactly.
Take it to the bank.
Yeah.
And secondly, I said, would you endorse it in a primary? He will not. He will not. Now, he might help recruit some folks. You can help somebody without helping somebody.
Right.
You know what I mean? Absolutely.
Right. It's very, again, it seems very much sort of the similar playbook to what happened with Debbie Stabenow and Alyssa Slotkin, right? That Debbie Stabenow, it was January, made the announcement, a very, again, surprising announcement to many. Alyssa Slotkin jumped in right away. Certainly, Debbie Stabenow did not endorse Slotkin.
Did we ever prove that the two of them talked before she decided?
No.
We never did.
No.
When did we say we did?
No. Because we're journalists.
Okay.
We don't
it's
do
a better
that.
story, though. You certainly couldn't rule it out.
No. Right. And Stabenow, that was her position. And she watched very closely. And I think had Slotkin gotten into a real pickle in the primary, she might have jumped in there. But she ran such a smart race in the primary, Stabenow didn't have to get involved outwardly.
All right, give me names on the list of would-bes, wannabes.
Oh, my gosh.
On the Democratic side,
Buttigieg, Mallory McMurrow, Garland Gilchrist. I mean, let's also say one thing that we haven't named yet, right, is the fact that this really shifts for Democrats because originally it was just going to be one open statewide seat at the very top in terms of chief executive for governor.
Well, the big story right now is what race are they going to run for? All these candidates.
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Not Republicans and Democrats.
This is Christmas
John
in
James.
January.
And you already got Mike Rogers, who came within 19,000 votes of beating Slotkin, saying, hey, it sounds like they want me again. Let's jump right back in there.
Let's clarify the governor's statement. Her statement was, I'm not running for the U.S. Senate. Is there some wiggle room in that statement?
Where are you going
There could
with
be,
this?
but I don't think it's going to happen.
She doesn't have to run for it. She can get appointed.
She's going to appoint her own self.
Appoints her.
What are you talking?
She could resign and let the lieutenant governor appoint her. That happened. That happened in the late 70s in Minnesota.
No.
I'm not saying.
What are in your mugs this morning?
No, it's happened.
Straight water.
It's happened.
I'm just saying that I'm not saying it. Okay, she's never whispered in any anybody's ear that she has even the faintest interest in service. But when she says, I'm not running, I just need to point out that there is a way to get to the U.S. Senate without running. Are we on the same page?
Do you think that's a job that she would want more than President of the United States?
I think we all.
I don't think she wants either of them.
We all
Maybe not, but I think when you're a governor, you're used to that executive power, and it's a difficult transition to then go to a body in which you have to be one of many.
The problem is they don't allow swearing in the U.S. Senate.
That would rule her out.
That could be one of them.
You get demerits for that. Okay,
That
who
could
else?
be one of the
Who
problems.
else on the Republican side?
Well, John James, obviously, Rogers, Eric.
Rinke.
Are we talking senator or governor?
We're talking Senate. Tudor Dixon name is out there now for that.
Yeah, but look, all these people, the question is, what are they going to run for? Governor, that's what everybody thought was going to be the only job available. Now it turns out there are two jobs. And as I think you hear, they have completely different skill sets. I mean, they shouldn't be interchangeable in candidates' minds, but they are.
It's a great way of putting it, Bill. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think one of the other things of note for voters, for political journalists, political watchers, the 2026 ballot is going to be as long as like a Cheesecake Factory menu. I mean, you have the governor's office, you have attorney general, you have state of the state, you have a secretary of state. You can tell I'm already thinking about state of state coverage. Secretary of state. You've got 2 Supreme Court seats. You've got the entire U.S. House delegation. You have the entire state House, the entire state Senate, and let's not forget the con. I mean, 2016 is going to be insane in Michigan. 2026. What did I 16? I'm living in the past.
That was insane.
Bill, while we're at it, would you check for coffee, please?
Fair.
This is going to be fascinating.
You know, last time the governor's office and the U.S. Senate seat were open simultaneously, 1886.
Oh, come on.
No.
Really?
I thought Zach Gorchow of Ballenger, I thought said 1916. We're gonna have to look it up.
No.
And now I'm giving Zach Gorchow a shout out like Matt Hall. There's a few people giving Zach Gorchow a
And the
shout
public
out.
is going to be absolutely worn out because they're starting. Everybody's starting
Right
earlier
now.
and earlier.
I
But
know.
right now, we just finished with a very contested U.S. Senate race, and we had the holiday break, and now here we are again.
All right, let's call in the judge and see what he's got to say. Judge?
That deprives you of one of your best lines.
We're,
Ballenger beat him up.
Listen, we're gonna waive the swearing in for you. We trust that you're going to tell us the truth, okay?
I'll try.
All right, so this little book that you wrote, how many times, if at all, did you say to yourself or to others around you, this ain't going to work?
You mean the book or the bankruptcy?
Well, let's start. I retract the question, Your Honor. May I rephrase?
Strike that, right?
Yes, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. No, the content of the book.
The content of the book, I wrote it right after the bankruptcy.
Was it going to fail, though?
Again, the book or the bankruptcy plan?
The bankruptcy thing, the plan. Did you think this thing would go down the dumper?
There were a number of moments, Tim, when we sort of had near-death moments. When the story of the grand bargain first broke.
How many near-death moments?
Oh, several. When I couldn't get funding from the state to kickstart the plan, when the story first broke, I was very concerned that it was going to scare off the foundations and some of their board members because it was very controversial any number of times.
Did you tell your wife that you thought it might fail?
No.
You didn't?
I'm an optimist. My wife says it's always 78 and sunny in my world, so I was pretty optimistic. Groundlessly, probably, but I was pretty optimistic.
Judge, what's been the biggest reward from writing this book?
Reliving it and seeing how people respond in light of how Detroit has come back so strongly, Chuck, in the last 10 years. If you think about where we were July 18th, 2013, at 4:06 p.m. when the petition was filed to where we are now. Really, it's wonderful to see what's happening in Detroit. The kids are coming back. The lights are on. Investment is booming in Detroit, almost like nowhere else. Detroit is viewed as the comeback city. So, it's very gratifying and rewarding to see what's happened 10 years later.
Judge,
and reliving that, right?
There were a lot of heroes in this entire undertaking. Who was the hero of heroes in your mind?
Rick Snyder.
The governor.
The governor. It took remarkable courage, vision, tenacity, and a certain amount of leap of faith to do this. There was no political, at least I'm not a politician, but there was no political advantage for him, a Republican from the west side of the state, to try to fix Detroit. And his predecessors had largely kicked it down the road, kicked Detroit and its problems down the road, and swept it under the rug. And Rick took it on. In fact, Bill, when I met with him after he was elected, but before he took office, I think he was an old friend of mine. Actually worked in my 1982 failed congressional campaign,
wow,
which proves I'm not a politician. But I asked him, now that you've been elected, Rick, what's on your agenda? And the first thing he said was Detroit.
Yeah. Judge, I'm curious, the takeaway after reading the book and just thinking now 10 years on from the emergence is this sort of almost once-in-a-lifetime moment, right, where all the ingredients, philanthropy, lawmakers, sort of came together to do a really big thing. It's something we don't see often.
Took a little pushing.
It took a little pushing, absolutely, and some drawings on napkins as well. But I'm curious, in your mind, as you look at the state of Michigan right now, what is the next thing, right? If you had a magic wand where you said, everyone come together, what's the next thing that should be fixed jointly, bipartisanly in this state?
Zoe, I'm not an expert at this, but it seems one of the more heartbreaking things that I see when I follow stories is the state of education, K through 12 in Michigan. And every politician who comes into office says they're going to fix it. And believe me, I know it's not easy. It's not something you can find a grand bargain for. Mm-hmm. But if there's one underlying problem that the state is facing, it's our education system.
Judge, you said you're not a politician, but in your book you wrote, she was long on glitz, but short on guts. That was a gratuitous shot at the former governor, Jennifer Granholm. Why did you feel the need to do that?
First of all, I have a lot of admiration and respect for Governor Granholm.
Yeah, no guts, but lots of glitz.
Well, I don't think she did what Rick Snyder did, which is to go after the underlying problems.
Well, do you think John Engler would have done that?
John Engler was a politician, and he didn't see any political payoff in Detroit.
Do you think any Democratic governor would have done that, given the Democratic makeup of the city of Detroit? Could they have survived?
They didn't, not in the way Rick Snyder did. They certainly were programmatic and provided funding on and off through revenue sharing and other things, but they didn't go after it the way Rick Snyder did. Root and branch, starting at the beginning, the underlying infrastructure problems of the city, both the financial infrastructure and the quality of life infrastructure. People think about a bankruptcy, and most bankruptcies are this, is just fixing the financial side of it. But in Detroit, we did more than that. We fixed not only the financial piece of it, but we also fixed, to a great extent, the quality of life issues. Police and fire services dramatically improved. In 2013, the response to emergency police calls was over an hour. It's now under 11 minutes, which is under the national average.
Don't the Republicans have some ownership of Detroit's problems? Because the first gentleman that you worked for in our town was Bill Milliken. You were an intern. He and Coleman Young put together the package of cultural, and when the Republicans took control, you know what they did? They dismantled it. Yeah. They took all the money away. So don't the R's hold some accountability on the shape that Detroit was in?
I wasn't trying to imply that they didn't. Chuck asked me about Democrats. Certainly the Republicans do. I mean, I think the Republican response before Rick had been largely to ignore the problems in Detroit.
Judge, we're talking
on a
about
statewide basis.
We're talking about Democrats and we're talking about Republicans. Let's talk about an independent. So for the past 10 years, the mayor of the city of Detroit.
I thought we were going to talk about my book.
Hey, we just did.
Indirectly. Just did.
Well, I mean, I guess, so let me go back to the book. Talk a little bit about the role that you see post-bankruptcy, Mike Duggan playing in Detroit, the future of Detroit, and what you make of his running for governor as an independent.
You know, I think about it this way, Zoe. During the bankruptcy, we provided the foundation and the scaffolding for the city. And then Mike became mayor, and he took it, and he just took it to new levels. And it's the fact that Detroit is now doing so well is a combination of both the bankruptcy, the foundation, and infrastructure we provided, and Mike Duggan's remarkable vision and tenacity in fixing problems, coming up with new ideas. He's been quite remarkable.
Could he have been as successful over the last decade or so if the grand bargain had not happened?
I think it would have been much harder for him, because had he come into office during the bankruptcy without the grand bargain money, which was, you know, $830 million, and with that $830 million, we took that and bought a 10-year holiday from the cities making pension contributions. So the city for 10 years didn't have to make pension contributions, and we were able to leverage that to get some agreements and deals with other creditors, and then the mayor was able to use it for other things. So he had that. But in addition to that, had he come in and had there not been a resolution of the bankruptcy, he would have been in trench warfare with his unions, who had no collective bargaining agreements during, and for many years before the bankruptcy had not had collective bargaining agreements. He would have been at war with his lenders, the bond issuers and their insurers. He would have been at war with the retirees. Pension contributions had not been made for several months at the filing of the bankruptcy. So all of these interests would not have been resolved. And I think another person who we should talk about is Kevin Orr. Kevin Orr did a terrific job. Of all of us in the bankruptcy.
The lawyer.
The emergency manager.
Emergency manager.
Yeah, of all of us in the bankruptcy, Kevin had the hardest job. He not only had to deal with me and Judge Rhodes, but he had to run the city. He had to run a bankrupt city.
Judge, Mike Duggan has said that he's going to run as an independent for governor, even though he's had a long Democratic background. Would Michiganders be better served if he doesn't have to just run as an independent and not have to really run until the general, if he had a spirited independent primary and had to run against someone, say, like a Peter Meyer, who does not fit well into the current Republican Party?
That's a great question, Chuck, and one I haven't thought about. The only thing I'll say is that I would never count Mike Duggan out. Mike is brilliant, and I mean that in the highest sense. He's a brilliant politician, a brilliant tactician, brilliant strategist, but also a visionary in terms of policy and execution on the policy. I'd never count Mike out. I mean, whoever thought that in the city of Detroit, 87% African American, that he could run, after being kicked off the ballot, that he could run, win a primary and win a general election overwhelmingly against
candidate.
Yeah, against a very popular African American.
Judge, what did you think of the pardons of the January 6th folks?
I thought they were atrocious.
They were what?
Atrocious.
Why?
I believe in the rule of law. I think it violates the rule of law. We have a system of pardons in our country. There's an exhaustive process for recommending pardons to the president. He didn't go through any of those. And if he had, I'm pretty confident that the recommendations would have been uniformly against it.
And the implications of that vis-a-vis the conduct of people now who know they could get pardoned if they do something that you would perceive to be wrong.
That for sure, but also the rule of law. I believe in the rule of law. These folks, without even getting into the underlying conduct, these folks went through the justice system. Many of them pled guilty. They went through the justice system. They were adjudicated. They were either found guilty by jury trial under our Constitution, or they pled guilty. And to simply have the president in one broad stroke pardon all of them, I think undermines the very tenets of our rule of law.
Judge, going back to the Graham bargain, how close was the Detroit Institute of Arts to being liquidated?
Well, that's a great question, Bill. I think it was very close because it was the only asset the city had, the only asset of any size. And, you know, I was the mediator. My job was to get deals with creditors. To get deals with creditors, you have to either have money or assets that can be monetized. And the cupboard was pretty bare. When I read Kevin Orr's proposal for creditors, the proposal for creditors, yeah. He had a whole section on what the debt structure was, what the quality of life issues were, and the section on assets was about a page and a half.
Judge, let's take a quick recess. You'll come back for overtime.
Sure.
You haven't had enough yet?
I guess that means I did okay, right, Coach?
If you're part of the expression, the jury's still out. Go to WKAR.org for the overtime with the good judge.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.